As we reported earlier, President Trump says Israel and Iran have agreed to a ceasefire after nearly 2 weeks of fighting. CBS News Middle East reporter Courtney Kealy joins us now here in the studio. Thank you for being here. It has been a day. What do you make of the timing?
Well, it's been a very interesting day. Now, the timing is, first of all, Iran tried to strike Qatar. Whether they gave a heads up or not is a big question mark, but what they didn't do is hit anything. The Qataris said they hit them right out of the sky, and they thwarted the mission. The Iranians, however, called it a win. Now, this is the government and the regime, does not speak to most of the people, but they were calling it a powerful attack. So they were upping the propaganda, and they were upping regime protest, a regime loyalists taking to the streets, not the regular population. Checkpoints and Iranian Revolutionary Guard taking to the streets, very significantly different than what we saw when Israel started hitting. Israel also hit a couple of symbolic targets, not military buildings or military, caches and arsenals. They hit 2 courthouses where the courthouses are the ones that bring down death sentences against Iranians. One's next to the notorious Evin prison. So it wasn't as kinetic as it was, especially after Saturday night. President Trump is saying there is going to be ceasefire. The next 6 hours is critical. What will ensue between Israel and Iran then? Will the U.S. be okay? Will no targets be hit? It doesn't seem like the Ayatollah wants a death sentence now. He can claim victory, but what it's not a victory for is the Iranian people who live under this oppressive regime.
So what are you going to be looking at over the next 6 hours right now?
I'll be monitoring any kind of violation of or anything that could make the ceasefire not happen around midnight our time. And then what President Trump also said is there'll be about 24 hours and then an end to this 12-day war is what he's calling it, as opposed to like the 6-day war that we know. But there can always be a violation. One can remain hopeful. I hate that cautiously optimistic that we always have to be in the Middle East, but it's true. Trump on Saturday night, remember his words, he was talking about bombs in all caps and peace prevailing. That's his goal. Whether people will meet this goal in the Middle East and Iran is the question mark.
So that's over the next 6 hours. And then over the days and weeks to come, what are we expecting for it to see?
Well, what's interesting is the Iranian activists and the opposition are all underground now trying to endure this bombardment because as regular Iranians, that's what they're up against. They're also trying to avoid checkpoints and any of these regime protests where people are holding up pictures of the President of the United States with fangs, and you'll see clerics, and that's not indicative of the people. Any kind of reports of that are coming out by reporters who have minders who can't speak to the average person. So there's 2 sides happening in Iran. What's clear and on the ground, which is a claim of victory by the regimists, and what's happening behind closed doors, which is still hopeful, a lot of sarcastic jokes to get through the day, and waiting to see what will happen next. But there is no real will, according to many of the countries, including our administrations throughout past presidents, that have really the will or any kind of support. It's all bipartisan support to not affect a regime change. So will the Iranians end up suffering again now because it's even worse after all these intelligence failures and collaborations show that the Israelis could penetrate the whole country? That's what I'm worried about.
When you look at this situation, we had talked earlier about if this continued to escalate and how it would affect the rest of the region. What are other countries, do you think they will try to get in on just the diplomacy to keep peace in the region?
Well, who's getting in, and not in a good way, is President Putin and Russia. The Iranian foreign minister basically arrived in Moscow last night, and they've always been the big benefactors and the spoiler in the Middle East. They propped up the Assad regime while the people were trying to overthrow the regime. They were the ones behind the barrel bombings and the complete destruction of Aleppo. They kept the chemicals, Hezbollah kept the chemicals that caused that port explosion in Beirut. Massive, horrific impact on many, many civilians for years. Devastating. Now, if the Iranian foreign minister is talking to Putin, and he's talking to Medvedev too, That's been the key meeting so far, but Putin's been commenting on it. Basically, we have to look at, does Russia get involved or to become the big benefactor? Now, they don't have a lot of money right now, so they can't really necessarily resupply them at the moment, but there would be a will to do that. Secondly, they would definitely want their veto on the UN Security Council to back them up in what they do. And that's, you know, that's really big and coming down the pike. And so they're involving Russia in this presents a huge problem for the U.S. And it also starts creeping into the more of a geopolitical problem of where Russia is involved and how deadly and how, and also what President Trump does in terms of, you know, somebody he's called a friend. If they're oppositional, if they're taking sides, and it's like this sort of quasi-Cold War, which it can be easily and looks like today, that's where it's heading right now.
All right, Courtney Kealy breaking it all down for us on this potential ceasefire. Thank you so much.